Texts dating back to antiquity described jaundice, the most striking symptom of hepatitis. Nothing was known about this jaundice, except that for centuries it was part and parcel of the fighting soldier's life, subjected to appalling hygiene conditions. In the middle of the 19th century, Czech Karl Rokitansky was the first to describe the hepatitis virus. Soon after, the United States was engulfed in civil war and soldiers were decimated by hepatitis. In 4 years, there were over 50,000 cases. Advances in combating the disease were made during the 20th century. During the First World War, the link between fecal matter and transmission of the disease was discovered. In the middle of the century, the first liver biopsy showed the damage it caused. And during World War II, Third Reich doctors used Germans as guinea pigs to prove that hepatitis could be of viral origin. At the beginning of the 1970s, the hepatitis A and B viruses were formally identified. Several years later, scientists observed that following blood transfusions, some patients became infected, not with the A or the B virus, but with a new form of hepatitis. With no great attempt at originality, they named the mysterious virus non-A, non-B hepatitis. In April 1989, non-A, non-B was identified and became known as Hepatitis C virus, or HCV. It was known to travel via the bloodstream and therefore could be transmitted by blood transfusion. Towards the end of the 1990s, blood products were at last more closely monitored, but numbers of people becoming infected continued to rise. The chief culprit, the sharing of contaminated needles among drug users. Since the 1990s, hepatitis C has been treated with a combination of a protein, called interferon, and an antiviral, ribavirin. But the cure rate is less than 50% and side effects are common and debilitating. The development at the end of 2013 of a new generation of treatments called DAA, for direct-acting antivirals, was a minor revolution, but a revolution with an exorbitant price tag. In June 2014, France and 14 other European countries launched a campaign calling on a private laboratory to reduce their price. France was accorded a small discount of around 8%. With 1.5 million deaths each year, hepatitis is in the top league of modern killer diseases. The disease takes many forms: A, B, C, D, E, and G. But they're not all as serious or as common. Hepatitis B and C are the most deadly. Almost 400 million people are chronic carriers of one or the other. B is found mainly in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, and C in North Africa, the Indian subcontinent, and in Southeast Asia too. Hepatitis C virus, which is transmitted by blood, kills around 500,000 people a year. There's no vaccine and treatment is hard to get. With over 5 million sufferers, Egypt, Pakistan, China, Myanmar, and Nigeria are the 5 worst affected countries. Egypt is a textbook case. In the 1960s, the country was devastated by schistosomiasis, an illness caused by parasitic worms. Doctors at the time used injections to treat it and reused syringes which were not properly sterilized. In 30 years, 7 million Egyptians received this treatment. Some of them became infected with the hepatitis C virus in the process. It then spread to the rest of the population, with the result today that 1 in every 10 Egyptians is infected. At the end of 2013, groundbreaking drug sofosbuvir came on the market. Costing roughly 100 euros to produce, its price in the United States is 60,000 euros and 41,000 euros in France. To treat all of French patients needing the drug would cost the equivalent of the total budget allocated to Paris's hospitals. In Egypt, Cefazbuvir costs approximately 1,600 euros, and the cost of providing treatment to all Egyptian patients would amount to 5 times the country's annual health budget. So, this miracle drug is a luxury product, which, without a drop in its price, only a privileged few will be able to afford. Viruses, immune system disorders, medication, alcohol. Whatever the cause, hepatitis is an inflammation of the liver. Hepatitis A, B, C, D, and E. Each of the 5 viruses that are responsible for the disease has its own specific characteristics and effects. Particularly deadly, hepatitis C, or HCV, is also the most difficult to treat. It spreads through the body via the bloodstream following blood transfusions or unsafe drug injection. Scientists think it is also possible that hepatitis C can be transmitted from mother to fetus during pregnancy or during sexual intercourse. Once in the body, the virus attacks the liver, whose job is to filter the blood. From there, the hepatitis C virus gets into the lobules, the units which enable the organ to function. Like all viruses, HCV has to penetrate a cell to survive and multiply. Alerted to the intrusion, the body sends in immune cells, its first line of defense. But in eliminating the virus, they also destroy the liver cells that harbor them. Luckily, in 20 to 40% of cases, the body's immune system rids itself of the invaders within 6 months. But most often, the immune cells aren't up to the task. After 6 months, the infection becomes chronic, and symptoms start to appear. Fever, fatigue, loss of appetite, yellowing of the skin and eyes, dark urine, nausea and vomiting. Inside the body, the virus continues to multiply and infect more lobules that are then destroyed by the immune cells. The destroyed lobules are replaced by what is called scar tissue. As scar tissue increases, it affects the liver's ability to function. This scarring process is called liver fibrosis. The liver shrinks and hardens, its blood vessels flatten, forcing the blood to bypass it. An excess of blood around the liver can lead to edema and esophageal varices. The next step is cirrhosis, which can progress to liver cancer, which can be fatal. Whether in a poor country or a rich country, the first thing a doctor will do when they suspect hepatitis is to do a blood test, a serological test to know if the person has been in contact with the hepatitis C virus. If the test is positive, a second test is necessary to know if the virus is active. If this test is also positive, the patient has active hepatitis C. The doctor then evaluates the type and extent of liver damage. A final test determines the genotype of the virus, the family to which it belongs. There are 6 different types of hepatitis C, and they aren't all treated the same way.
Hepatitis C used to be treated with peg interferon, which is given by injection, so quite restrictive. There was an injection every week and over quite a long period, depending on the genotype. Treatment lasted anywhere between 6 and 12 months. On top of that, it wasn't well tolerated, and the patient had to be monitored closely. Worse still, the treatment wasn't very effective. The virus was eliminated in around 50% of cases only. But treatments have been simplified. They're easier to take, without side effects, and most importantly, they're effective. The virus is eliminated approximately 95% of the time. Treatment is shorter, usually 3 months, and is well tolerated. So everything's changed for the treatment of viral hepatitis, in industrialized countries at least.
One serious drawback in this mini-revolution is that the new hepatitis C treatments are exorbitantly expensive.
In less developed economies, in Africa, Asia, Central Asia, in many countries with a relatively high prevalence of hepatitis C, it's almost impossible to provide these treatments.
Recently, there's been a revolution in the treatment of hepatitis C. 5 years ago, patients were treated with a combination of peg interferon and ribavirin for 1 year. It cost 25,000 euros, and it was very difficult for the patient, as interferon has multiple side effects, and the cure rate was only 50%. The situation has completely changed in the last 3 years. We've been using new treatments, new antiviral medications. The treatment lasts 12 weeks, and 95% of patients are cured, and there are almost no side effects. My dream is that in 5 years, we'll be able to routinely screen patients in clinics during a regular checkup, and we'll be able to tell them then and there that they're infected with hepatitis C. We'll give them a 12-week treatment, like being given a long course of antibiotics, which will have very few side effects. 3 months later, after a blood test, we'll be able to tell the patient that they're cured. And in fact, we're nearly there. The next thing we need to do is lower the cost of treatment. Currently, treatment with the new antivirals is very expensive. It costs 100,000 euros. In low-income countries, in Asia and Africa, generic treatments produced in India cost 100 times less. It costs 1,000 euros. But 1,000 euros is still a lot. Who can afford that in Africa? Which government or individual can afford that? We need to find ways to make treatment more affordable. Maybe one of the big foundations, like the Global Fund, that finances treatments for AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis, will agree to subsidize treatment for hepatitis C. We're hoping for this type of breakthrough. The long-term objective is elimination. This is possible in industrialized countries, where transmission is essentially restricted to IV drug users, who become infected when they share needles, as the virus is spread through the blood. If there were a very strong policy for the prevention and treatment of drug users, we could eliminate the virus, and therefore transmission of the virus, in so-called industrialized countries. And maybe I'm dreaming, but countries like Australia are seriously considering this type of policy. In low-income countries, where transmission mainly occurs in health facilities, through contaminated needles or during surgery, with the best preventive measures, along with more affordable treatments, we should, over time, be able to greatly reduce transmission and the circulation of the virus in the population. And why not even lead, in some regions, to elimination?